China dropped over 1 million rabbits into one of the deadliest deserts on Earth. No joke. This wasn't food or a failed experiment. It was a secret plan to bring a dead land back to life. And it worked. The results shocked scientists in the United Nations alike. Now countries all over the world are scrambling to copy it. You and I are going to unpack how one man, some fluffy rabbits, and 300 million trees beat a desert the size of Massachusetts. 41% of Earth is already desert, and every year more land just dies. Farms turn to dust, rivers vanish, and entire villages get swallowed whole. The United Nations warns that 40% of our remaining land is currently under a major threat. That means half the planet could turn into dead sand while we're still around. No water, no food, nothing. China felt this nightmare more than anyone else. For decades, a massive desert was literally eating the country alive. We're talking about the Kubuqi Desert, the 7th biggest wasteland in China. It covers over 7,200 square miles in the north. Winters hit -4 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind cuts through you like a cold blade. Summers are so scorching they boil the moisture right out of the dirt. Historically, people called this place the Sea of Death. They weren't exaggerating at all. Here's the twist that makes this mystery so wild. The Kubuqi wasn't always a desert. Just a few generations ago, this place had rivers and lush green grasslands. It had happy villages and farms. Then the winds came, and the grass died. The sand started moving and never stopped. In just a few short decades, the desert crawled 25 miles east, burying thousands of acres of farmland. Dunes as tall as 20-story buildings rose up. Entire villages just disappeared. Roads vanished overnight. Families packed their bags and left with nothing. By the 1950s, the government launched one of its biggest campaigns ever. They started anti-desert programs and planted massive windbreak forests. They banned grazing and dug wells deep into the parched, cracked earth. Thousands of workers were sent in, millions were spent, and the desert kept growing. Nothing worked. The Kubuqi was winning. Enter our hero, Wang Wenbiao. Wang wasn't a scientist or a billionaire. He was just a teacher from Inner Mongolia. Every day he biked more than 6 miles through the desert just to reach his classroom. Some mornings the wind was so brutal it half buried his bike in sand. Dust filled his lungs, and the cold froze his fingers to the handlebars. Anyone else would have quit and left, but Wang made a choice that changed everything. He stared at the endless wall of sand around him and made a vow. If I can't escape the desert, I'll make it pay me rent. In 1988, Wang spent every penny he had and borrowed the rest. He bought a tiny, dying salt company right on the edge of the Kubuqi. People laughed. Officials told him he was absolutely wasting his time. But Wang had a plan. A strange plan. A plan that no one else had ever tried. He was going to fight sand with rabbits. Stick with me. We need to talk about trees first. Because without trees, the whole plan would fall apart. Wang hired 100 bulldozers and 300 men to work 18-hour days. Let's look at this together. They flattened dunes and built fences for miles and miles. Then, he started planting willows. Millions of willow trees pushed into the sand, rows so long they vanish into the horizon. Why willows? Because they are quite literally the toughest plants on the planet. Their roots do not just sit there. They dive deep, 30 feet or more, punching through dry sand to find hidden water no other plant can reach. Those roots lock the sand down, stopping the dunes from moving another inch. Think of it like a massive underground net stretching across the desert floor. In just 5 years, Over 1,200 square miles of wasteland, an area nearly the size of Rhode Island, turned completely green. Ancient sand dunes that stood for centuries actually started to shrink. Wind speeds near the planted zones dropped by up to 90%. 15 million tons of sand, once farm-burying dust, were now held firmly in place. The trees were working, but Wang knew they alone would not solve the mystery. The soil was still biologically dead. It had zero nutrients. Nothing stays green forever without a consistent source of fuel. That is when he brought in the rabbits. And not just any fluff balls. Rex rabbits. French-bred Rex rabbits, to be exact. You and I are about to see why these little guys are the real secret. They are actually some of the most profitable animals on the entire planet. In the fashion world, Rex rabbits are known as white gold. Their fur is like velvet, smoother than otter, and they lack stiff guard hairs. You can use the pelt right after tanning. No plucking or shaving required. One high-quality Rex rabbit pelt can sell for nearly $30. The cost to raise one? Just $2. We are talking a 15 times return on a single animal. Now China owns 80% of the global Rex fur market because of this. But wait, here is the unbelievable twist that nobody saw coming. The rabbits were not just valuable for their fur. The secret was their poop. Rex rabbit droppings are loaded with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are the three nutrients that desert sand is completely missing. When a rabbit does its business, that waste does not just sit there. It breaks down, transforming dead sand into something almost magical. A dark, moist, nutrient-heavy soil called humus. Real soil. The kind where plants can actually thrive and grow. Something that had not existed in the Kubuqi for hundreds of years. And there is one more thing that makes this almost unbelievable. Rex rabbits cannot fully digest most grass seeds. So every time a rabbit eats and then leaves a deposit, it is planting live seeds directly into a pile of natural fertilizer. Built-in planting pods, just waiting for the next rain to sprout. The rabbits were not just feeding the ground. They were building a world. They were engineering a new ecosystem, one tiny delivery at a time. Scientists found that each acre under this willow rabbit model generates 5 tons of soil a year. Dead sand becomes living farmland in just 5 years, in a place once called the Sea of Death. You might wonder how millions of rabbits survive in a waterless, freezing desert. The answer is the willows. Wang designed it that way from the start. Fresh willow shoots are their primary food source, while the dense leaves provide shade from the heat and a buffer against winter winds. The mystery is solved. The trees and rabbits saved each other. The secret? The rabbits. They fertilized the soil so the willows grew like crazy. Trees feed bunnies, bunnies feed dirt, dirt feeds trees. See the logic? It is a perfect loop, where nothing is wasted and everything gets stronger. These Rex rabbits live in high-tech eco-farms tucked inside the green zones. They never get loose in the wild. Instead, their meat is sold as food. Fashion gets the fur, and traditional medicine takes the organs. No waste allowed. Even the manure heals the desert soil. Every single rabbit pot has a job. Nothing is lost. By 2010, the Dalit Banner spot in the Kubuqi had 4.5 million rabbits, raking in 560 million yuan. That is $76 million, lifting 10,000 families straight out of poverty. A family only needed $4,000 to kickstart their own rabbit empire. And they could quadruple that money in their very first year. Not bad. Thousands of families who fled when the desert swallowed their homes are back. They are returning home. But Wang Wenbiao? He was just getting started. In 2012, He looked at 7,200 square miles of sand. He managed it all, then made a move the world called totally insane. The plan? Build the biggest solar plant ever, shaped like a giant horse. Yes, a horse. Meet Junma, which translates to fine horse in Mandarin. It is a massive field of 196,000 solar panels. From space, it looks like a giant horse galloping across the desert dunes. It is not just power. It is the biggest piece of energy art on Earth. And it cranks out 2.3 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity every year. That is enough juice to power a city the size of Miami, Florida. Here is the real kicker. Those panels do way more than just make power. They kill the wind, slashing ground speeds by up to 50%. They create shade where life used to be completely impossible before. In that shade, Wang dropped in rabbits, sheep, and geese to start grazing. The animals mowed the grass, and their manure supercharged the desert soil. The sand stopped blowing. The dead desert transformed into a functioning green zone. It became a thriving green ecosystem in only 4 years. By 2022, over 2,600 acres of what they called the Dead Sea became a lush energy oasis. In 2022 alone, get this, Junma stopped 760,000 tons of coal from burning up and slashed 1.85 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions. That is like planting 80 million trees in just one single year. You might be thinking, okay, this is great, but why should we care? What does this mean for the world? And why did the United Nations care? In 2011, the United Nations group fighting desertification finally stepped in. They officially named the Kubuqi the global model for fighting back the sand. Only a tiny handful of places on Earth have ever received this honor. By 2019, it was the gold standard for restoring dead land globally. Now every other country can study and copy the exact methods used there. And they are doing it. Just look at Andalusia in southern Spain. The Romans called this place the empire's pantry because it was so fertile. Today, the world looks to the desert for the next big engineering miracle. Spain is drying out. Rain has plummeted 40% in 30 years, leaving rivers bone dry. Ancient channels are empty. The farmland is literally cracking apart like a broken clay pot. The EU warns that 75% of Spain is turning into a total wasteland. It is the driest spot in Europe now. In some places, things are much worse. Farmers are drilling 650 feet down just to find a single drop of water. But Spain is fighting back, using a secret weapon from China called the Kubuqi method. The Andalusia 2030 plan is planting millions of olive trees and grasses to stabilize the dust. New solar farms let crops grow right under the panels. It is high-tech shade. This keeps the ground moist while pumping out clean energy. Talk about a win-win. China's desert blueprint is now the go-to guide for saving dying land across the globe. But wait. You and I need to look at the darker side of this supposed miracle. The rabbit miracle has a messy history. Just look at what happened in Australia. In the 1800s, someone brought 24 rabbits to Australia for a little fun. A British settler wanted something to hunt for sport. What could possibly go wrong, right? In just 50 years, those 24 rabbits turned into over 1 billion fluff balls. 1 billion! They devoured every blade of grass and chewed through every single root. They stripped the land bare, turning 2/3 of Australia's green plains into a dusty graveyard. Australia is still dealing with the consequences of that fluffy disaster today. So, why are rabbits heroes in China, but ecological villains in the outback? Simple. Control. In Australia, the rabbits were just dumped into the wild, with zero plan. They conquered a whole continent because nothing was there to eat them. total rabbit chaos. The government built a 2,000-mile fence just to try and keep them out. They used viruses and organized mass hunts, but the rabbits just kept coming. Nothing worked. But in the Kubuqi, these Rex rabbits never actually touch the wild. They live in high-tech eco-farms with strictly managed diets and supervised populations. The whole system is locked down. Without that control, China faces the same disaster. If one rabbit escapes the plan, the Australian nightmare could easily repeat itself. Now, some experts are looking at this model and saying, hey, not so fast. Rabbit poop is great fertilizer, but too much of it creates a massive nitrogen problem. That messes with the soil chemistry and can poison the local water supply. In some test zones, they are already seeing gross green algae blooming in the water. It is happening near the fertilizer ponds. That is a major red flag for overload. Some skeptics argue the rabbits are just a small part of why this actually works. The real power? Massive government cash and heavy machinery doing the dirty work. It is all about national policy. Wang Wenbao is a visionary, but he had help. He had the entire weight of the Chinese state behind him. We have to be realistic. No miracle is perfect. But you and I can't ignore what the actual numbers show. Between 2010 and 2020, this green economy made over $10 billion. That makes it the most profitable green project in all of Asia, hands down. A recent 2023 report shows that wild deer are finally coming home. Foxes and birds have quadrupled in number since 1990. The life is returning. Animals that had completely vanished are suddenly showing up in the desert again. They are thriving in places where there used to be nothing but sand and bones. Over 100 native plants, from feathergrass to poplars, are sprouting everywhere. Even rare desert flowers are blooming again. It is working. Here is the real shocker. Water levels in the Kubuqi jumped 5 to 6.5 feet in just 20 years. Think about that. If you and I dug a well in that desert today, we would strike water at half the depth our parents did. In a wasteland, that is literally the ultimate game changer. The soil in the Kubuqi is not blowing away in the wind anymore. Now it is rich, dark, and smells like actual life for the first time in centuries. Massive sand dunes got replaced by carpets of green grass. Pretty wild, right? Where there was once only silence, there are now birds. Families are moving back and opening shops instead of running away. One stubborn guy and millions of rabbits doing exactly what rabbits do best. Plus hundreds of millions of willow trees anchoring the ground. Oh, and a giant solar horse visible from orbit, seriously. They used to call this place the Sea of Death. Now, it shows what happens when we stop punching nature and start helping it out. The desert lost. And if 7,200 square miles of shifting sand can be saved, then you and I know there is no reason the rest of the world cannot do the same. So, are we going to fix things before time runs out?